A very warm welcome to this seminar and webinar, part of our series discussing whether teaching should have an independent professional body and how we go about the next stage of creating such a body. We have this evening a number of distinguished speakers. They include John Tomset, Head Teacher of Huntingdon School in Huntingdon, York. Al Moon, Vice Principal of David Young Community Academy, Seacroft, Leeds. Joining us remotely on the webinar, Deborah Seddon, Head of Policy at the Engineering Council. And we have the other participants who are part of this, and we're looking forward to a full and helpful discussion. The way we plan to operate is that the 4 presentations will be made one after the other in the order that I've mentioned them, and then we'll move into general discussion and responses to those. So I'm going to start off by just summarizing some of the points the discussions have reached using this presentation, which you see has 3 logos on the bottom. The current College of Teachers. I should have introduced myself. My name is Raphael Wilkins, and I am the president of the existing College of Teachers. That's the logo on the left. The Prince's Teaching Institute and the Teachers Development Trust. And the short presentation I'm using to introduce the seminar is an agreed presentation between the 3 organisations who are jointly facilitating this stage of the debate. Of course, it's not a blueprint. There is much work and discussion going on, and it's very much an evolving scene. So, why a new chartered college? Well, there are some words on the screen that you can see. In many professions in the UK, there is an agreed territory where it's quite right in a democracy that politicians make policy, set strategy, and have an involvement. There is then another territory where it is agreed that matters of professional practice should be decided by the profession itself. And mediating the boundary between those 2 areas, which is always a fuzzy boundary, is a professional body which helps to ensure that, as far as possible, matters which are truly matters of professional practice should be taken by expert professionals and not by politicians. And that's the fundamental consideration behind creating a new independent professional body for teaching now. The areas of activity it would engage in would be similar to those of the professional bodies in other professions. So certainly there would be an offer of continuing professional development, but also some frameworks and infrastructures to give more value, more coherence, and also more recognition to the great amount of professional development that does go on within our profession. So that would be a significant part and benefit of what the college provides for its members. Some of the activities would be geared to whole institutions. when we talk about teachers, of course, we include head teachers and school system leaders. And so some of the benefits are when a school as a whole organisation is committing to a rich professional culture of development as a whole institution. The college would be a repository for knowledge, including research knowledge coming from big research projects, but also from the research undertaken by professional practitioners themselves. And it would develop and recognise standards. A lot of professions operate by recognising a chartered status for mature, developed practitioners, and then some form of higher recognition for those who have reached the professional stage where they have significant responsibility for supervising the work of other members of the profession. So the college would also have a role in recognising standards. Some people ask how it would differ from the General Teaching Council for England. In a number of ways, the GTC was set up by legislation, so it could be revoked by legislation. That is one difference. The GTC had compulsory membership and the very narrow remit of compulsory registration to practice and disciplinary action for misconduct. And that was more or less the entirety of its brief, which is not a very inspiring brief. The GTC did what it could to widen its role, but nevertheless, it started off with that narrow focus. So in terms of our progress towards this, we have a series of stages envisaged. The three organisations that are currently coordinating the debate want through one means or another very rapidly to create a broad and representative group from the profession, including the current professional membership organisations already operating in teaching, to help take the process forward in a series of stages which will lead to the birth of the new organisation. So the Prince's Teaching Institute initiated the set of debates that have been going on for very nearly 2 years now. And the current series of seminars, debates, consultations is being jointly led by the current College of Teachers, the PTI, and the Teacher Development Trust. The current College of Teachers fully supports the creation of a new independent professional body for teaching. We wish to see ourselves being totally transformed and replaced to bring that about. The work of the current college may be of interest if people want to look at that on our website, but it does not occupy currently a big territory in the crowded scene of teachers' professional organisations, and we believe the modern profession needs a new and jointly created organisation. The term Royal College of Teaching, which emerged from the Select Committee report, is one that some people favour. There is no commitment at the moment about what the name of the new independent professional body would be. It is agreed it should be governed by a royal charter, but it would only have royal in its title if the members wanted that, and if government supported it, and if royal prerogative supported it also. So, what next is further debate, further consultation, in which we wish to involve as broad a base of the profession as possible. And the email on there of Angela McFarlane, who is the Chief Executive and Registrar of the College of Teachers, is the focal point at present for coordinating the Claim Your College campaign. So there are a few words of introduction, and I want to pass over straight away to the first of our speakers, and I'm delighted very warmly to welcome John Thompson.
Thank you, Raphael, and good evening, everybody. And I've got a few things to say. A few things I want to pick up on what Raphael said, and I'm clearly speaking representing myself, but I'm also here as head teacher of the school, and again here also as a co-founder of the Head Teachers Roundtable. And we have very clearly in our manifesto for the next government, of the next election, we've fully supported the implementation of the blueprint, exploring the implementation of the blueprint for the Printers Institute for a Royal College of Teaching. I just want to say a few things. I think what we mustn't do, one of the things I would say urgently we mustn't do, is create some huge monolith that actually becomes a nightmare to administer, becomes slow and cumbersome, and doesn't meet the needs of teachers. Right? If we're going to have a Royal College of Teachers, it's got to meet the needs of teachers. That's the bottom line. If it doesn't, if it's some big monolith that we're all quite happy and feel it's going to be, it's going to roll this or roll that or roll the other, then if it's not doing anything good for teachers, then we might as well not even bother now. Right? That's the bottom line. And if it doesn't come from bottom up, I think there's an issue too. And I think the consultation has to come bottom up, and we need to find out what teachers want. And I think it's quite unclear what they want. I think what the college has to focus on, and I've got a set of bullet points here I'm just going to refer to, is CPD, is training, is raising the status of the profession. If you look at all the great jurisdictions across the world, teaching has a really high currency. There's a highly respected profession. The one thing that is the thing that draws people to the profession in places like Finland, and places like South Korea. Right? So we have to raise the standards and expectations of the profession, and the Royal College might be some way of doing that. But if there's nothing in it for teachers, then we're going to struggle. So we have to be really clear. I think what it should do is produce, ensure that the kind of higher standards of CPD and continuing professional development for teachers. One of the things that I'm really fascinated by is whether any teacher can ever remember a piece of training that has affected their practice, which has improved student outcomes. Ask any teacher if that's really happened. Can they remember in the length of their career? I asked that question quite recently to a brilliant teacher at our school who is now our head of research. And Jan Bernard, he's been at our school for 11 years. You can work out how many hours, days of professional development he's endured, and he couldn't think of one moment that had actually really affected his teaching and actually impacted on student outcomes. So I think that's one thing that I'm really interested in. If the Royal College of Teaching can both ensure the quality of CPD, monitor it, and also have some kind of way of establish some statutory CPD for staff, that if you come to this profession, we're not going to just train you to get through your first year. There's a career pattern that goes all the way through your career. Then I'd be really interested in a Royal College of Teaching. I think that's something we have to guarantee. And I think what we've not talked about is career pathways. And I think something else that the Royal College could do would be to create career pathways that are really so that if you started your career in teaching, you knew that you could choose several pathways that would lead you on with great training, not just in your first year or 2 years, then it's pretty haphazard, but you could see your way through to 5, 10, 15, 20 years. And then you've got a chance of curing one of the biggest problems, which is staff retention. Because after 4 or 5 years, we're losing a significant number of well-trained people who we've really invested money in becoming teachers, and we can't afford to do that any longer. I think that balance between government and the practice is a really interesting one that Raphael mentioned. I think there's a clue in the title. We are state education, so the government absolutely has a right to be involved. And we're not going to create something that we're going to suddenly say is completely independent of government. But when it comes to understanding pedagogy, when it comes to understanding curriculum, we have to have a pretty decent say in what goes on. And some of the things that have happened in the last few years about curriculum development have been shameful, really. And if you go back 50, 60, 70 years, ministers never got involved in anything in terms of policy on the ground. They really didn't. And what they did was leave it up to the experts. And I want to get back to that moment. I was talking yesterday with John Dunford when I was on a conference with him, on a panel with him at a conference, the whole education conference. And he's really looking forward to getting back to curriculum development that he did in the first stages of his career. He's really excited about us being able to do that again as practitioners. And I think that's where we need to be, rather than individual politicians interfering almost unilaterally in policy development. So the last thing I want to say, and I'm interested, I'm glad to see in Raphael's slides, is that I think we need to be asking ourselves really hard what works. And if we could become a centre, if the Royal College could become a centre which coordinates research into education, becomes the go-to centre for teachers finding out what works, so they're not guessing when they practice in the classroom, they're not having a go at something and then ditching it because they don't know if it works or not when they start off. I think that would be good. So that, on top of asking people whether they've ever had some CPD that's affected their outcomes of their students, I'm also really interested in research, because I think there's a ton of educational research that goes on. I think there are very few people who read educational research. I think there are very few teachers who read it. If you do read it as a teacher, do you ever change your practice? I mean, that's rare. First of all, getting teachers to read, practice, research, then getting them to change their practice, think about that, then getting them, if they've done it for 6 months and tried it and tried it and tried it, to evaluate whether it's had any impact or not on student outcomes. Then, if it hasn't had any impact on student outcomes, they would ditch the practice they've been developing for 6 months. Now, that's we're a mile away from being an evidence-based profession. And if the Royal College of Teaching or teachers or teaching could do something along those lines, I think that would be powerful too. So that's kind of my message. It has to go from bottom up. It has to add to what we do, rather than being something which sounds right and sounds great, but actually becomes a bureaucratic nightmare. The head teachers round table is just 10 people who got together on Twitter. We don't have any constitution. We're fleet of foot because of that. Sometimes we'll get an email and say, we ought to do something. We've not had a meeting for a few months. Okay, Tom, we'll come down to your school at Highbury Grove and we'll have a meeting. Okay, that sounds great. We ask people about it. We get some purchase, we get some currency, and they come along. That way, we have got round the table with the Secretary of State for Education on more than one occasion and influenced policy. That's because we're fleet of foot and we're not bound, we're not kind of anchored down and hampered by huge bureaucratic processes. And I think that has to be a learning point for the Royal College of Teachers. If we become unbelievably bureaucratic and a monolith and a massive institution, then that won't work either. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, let's pass on straight away to Al.
Hello there. My name's Al Moon. I'm a Vice Principal at an academy in Leeds. I'm speaking for myself here. it's very interesting to hear what John has had to say on Raphael, introducing what we're here to talk about, and the College of Teaching. But going back to what John said about the College of Teaching really needs to have an impact on teachers, but really primarily it's an impact on students, and what students, dare I say it, children are learning, and what they're actually doing in classrooms and what they're learning. So we mustn't kind of forget that. That might be a cliche, but it is all about the kids and what the kids are learning. And I think I concur with what John is saying, that we need to see that impact, and that building from the bottom up, I think, is a really good message to bring to this meeting, and to bring to any consultation that's going to happen. One of the big things for me about bringing in a College of Teaching that's representative of our profession is that there's a really very noisy room out there. There are all sorts of people out there who wanting a slice of what should be influencing what's going on in the classroom and what students are learning. Whether that's the National College for Teaching Leadership, whether that's the unions, whether that's the National Science Learning Centre that we're sitting in at the moment, whether that, dare I say it, is a DFE or Ofsted, is a very, very noisy room. And one of the questions I would ask is, how can the college kind of tune in and bring clarity so that we can all hear what's happening for teachers and to teachers? So that's a real issue for me. There needs to really be the college really needs to bring status for teachers. I think Raphael and John have mentioned that. They kind of almost need, they very, very much need to be objective, that objectivity, but they need to have clout. That objectivity and independence may give it clout. If we've looked and compared to other national organisations, and I think they do have clout, but there's a clarity of message around that. And I really, for me, it is a real clarity of message, and that real clarity of representation of teaching, the teaching profession. Yeah, professional development. I'm not sure if I quite agree with John about, I can't think of training that I have done that has had an impact on my own professional practice. And in what
I'd like to know about it.
Yeah, okay. And hopefully, from what I do, a large part of what I do is, I kind of lead within our academy and within our own multi-academy trust as well, professional development. And hopefully, the professional development we provide does have an impact on what students are doing. But I do get what John's saying. Being an evidence-based profession is crucial, and I don't think we are evidence-based at all. And the research, there's a huge amount of research around what is the most effective way of teaching, and therefore it brings me to a point of we need the college to be able to come up with some sort of median. We have a pendulum that may swing from a skills-based curriculum to a knowledge-based curriculum, but actually, who is it that's deciding where that pendulum may be? So I think the college needs to be able to do that. Clarity of message I've mentioned. A few questions that have cropped up while I've been thinking about this over the last few days and perhaps a few weeks as well, is that how is this going to be marketed? If it's going to be a charter, such as a charter of engineer, perhaps, are we expecting the profession to become qualified, to become a member of the Royal College of Teaching? And if that qualification is just a box ticking exercise, then we need to call into question whether that has validity or usefulness. Is it taking away from what's going on in the classroom? I don't know. But in this consultation and this process, we need to kind of answer that question. So, how will it then be marketed towards the teachers from the bottom up, from that NQT? Is there going to be a a charge. You know, we need to consult. You know, we need to decide on that, whether there's going to be a charge. You know, yeah, 150 quid might not sound a great deal to a principal such as John on his huge salary. However, you know, 150 quid per year on top of your union fees and for an NQT is not. You know, we need to consider that, and that whether a charge is a good idea and whether a charge puts people off. Before I came, I managed to talk to a few members of staff about the representation through a college of teaching, and they would be, when I asked them about it straight off the bat, they were kind of their general response was, "Why would we get involved in that?" When I explained to them what it was about and whether it was about professional development and standards and a good objective representation for the teaching profession, they understood and supported it. So therefore, you know, there's a real need for clarity of message and a good marketing of this, dare I say it. So just a few questions there to perhaps kind of mull over as we go through this evening, the rest of this evening. You know, but, you know, what does the Royal College do? You know, I mean, John and I know John works with my boss, Ros McMullen, and I know very much Ros is, you know, very much supports, and I know that the Head Teachers Round Table does, and I know John does. You know, there's the contribution to the system, and how does the Royal College support teachers to contribute to the system? You know, so where is the leadership training within this? And then we get into a whole noisy room again about where the, you know, where does the National College of Teaching and Leadership fit into this? You know, where does the DFE, again, where does Ofsted fit into this? But you know, where does leadership? But also another question is, you know, where are those people that sit outside of that teaching profession but contribute a great deal to schools and academies right across the age ranges? You know, what about governors? You know, where do governors fit into this? Is there a professionalisation of governance that we need to talk about as well? And you know, how do we consult them, get them included in this, and how do they contribute to that? And therefore, what impact is there on the teaching and the teachers? So just a few questions from me there. I've kind of been bouncing around a little bit in response to Raphael and John. But bottom line for me, and a big driver for myself and my passion still for teaching is, what is the impact of this going to be on how much kids learn in their lessons day in, day out? Okay.
Thank you. Thanks for that. Now, our next contributor is Deborah.
Hello, can you hear me? Hello.
Hello. Hello, Deborah.
I just wanted to test that you can hear me okay.
We can hear you. Yes, we can hear you.
Good. Okay, thank you very much. I'm sorry I can't be there, but let's hope that the technology helps us to get through. Thanks very much for inviting me to contribute. As Raphael mentioned earlier, I'm Head of Policy and Standards here at the Engineering Council, and we are the regulatory body for engineering. What I can only hope to do in my presentation really is to set the scene for how the engineering profession is organised, and perhaps give you a few nuggets for you to go away and think about, perhaps sow some seeds for your consideration. Before I get going on that, Angela did mention to me that it would be good to say just a tiny bit about my background. I'm here at the Engineering Council. I'm a scientist by background, and immediately after graduating I taught biology for about 12 years. So my heart is very rooted in teaching. And for the last 6 years, I've been chair of governors at a primary school in southwest London. So I have been keeping a bit of a watching brief of what's going on. Are you still there? Have you still got me? We seem to have lost you then. I like the term that was used earlier, noisy room. When we're going on to talk about the engineering profession, you could say there's a noisy room here too, but actually all the different players have got very specific and defined roles, and perhaps I should just run through that first of all. We're the Engineering Council and we're very small. We're an organisation of 24 people for a registrant profession of about 230,000. So we're quite lean and mean and we operate very efficiently. Beneath us, as it were, there are 36 engineering professional bodies. And the nearest analogy I can think of is that they would be perhaps your subject or discipline associations, and they would be the ones who are offering the CPD that seems to have been a recurrent theme in what you're talking about so far. We don't get at all involved in promoting engineering as a profession or as a career to schools. That's another organisation called Engineering UK. And nor do we get involved in publishing what I would call technical information on the best way to do a particular bit of engineering. Some of that would fall to what's called the Royal Academy of Engineering, which is perhaps at the elite end of things, and they have fellows who are elected. So we have different players, and it's not impossible to have lots of different players and everybody work very efficiently. If I turn now to what we do as the Engineering Council, and this may not actually be the sort of organisation that you're really thinking about as your college, but some of what we do may be. We set the standards of competence and commitment that anybody who comes onto our register as an engineer or a technician has to meet. They have to meet our standards. We hold that register. So we demonstrate to society that the profession is working to a high standard of competence, and we are a single authoritative voice on standards. None of those other players that I mentioned, the Royal Academy, all the professional bodies, set the standards. We do that. But they work to our standards because we work very collaboratively. The other thing we do is we accredit engineering degrees. So we have a very strong role in ensuring that those who are coming through into engineering are graduates who are fit for purpose and are what society needs. In terms of how we describe our model of regulation in the engineering profession, we would say it's self-regulation by those who are involved in the profession. We're not a statutory regulator. We weren't set up by statute, like, for example, the Architects Registration Board. So a government can't come along and take us away, as it were. We are self-regulating, and I think that's quite an important criterion. But we are regulated from the bottom up. So individual registrants, through their professional bodies, have a say in what we do. We don't set the standards by the 24 of us sitting in our office, huddling round and deciding what they should be. All of our work is done through committees made up by registrants. So there's a very strong input. And those committees include people at all stages of their career, and also, as I said earlier, include technicians. You mentioned earlier your other people who are involved in teaching. So I think it's quite important to mention engineering technicians as well. However, we do have a Royal Charter, and I think there are some really important advantages associated with having a Royal Charter. I'll leave the issue of royal to one side. That's entirely up to you whether you go down that route. That's up to the teachers involved to decide. But an organisation that has been awarded a charter has been looked at by the Privy Council. It's been investigated. It means that the profession is deemed reliable, trustworthy. It's a voluntary organisation. It regulates standards, and it will look after the standards of that profession and, if necessary, exercise some professional discipline. So putting it at its basic, if a profession has a very strong impact on society and doesn't have self-regulation, then the likelihood is someone is going to come along and do it for you, or dare I say it, do it to you. So there are certain advantages in going down this route. The peers who are involved in our regulation are, as I say, the 230,000 registrants on our register. But one word there is that that is by no means all of the people who are working in the UK who consider themselves engineers. And so I know one of the questions you are thinking about is, what is the minimum buy-in you might need from across your profession to get yourselves going? I would say get going. 230,000 is way short of the millions in the UK who consider themselves by dint of their environment or their job title to be engineers or technicians, but they have chosen not to become professionally qualified and come onto our register. I think the issue of charter, the really important thing before I leave this, is acting in the public interest. That is a fundamental requirement of the Privy Council when it awards a charter. Clearly engineering and engineers have to act in the public interest, not least from the point of view of risk and safety. I would say that teaching very much acts in the public interest and has to protect its vulnerable consumers. So I'd like to say briefly what engineers and technicians say to us about being on the register. We take a survey every couple of years, and the last one was in 2013. The vast majority of them, over 90%, value being registered. They say it helps with their career progression, it gives them greater professional status, and it recognises publicly their skills and experience. Matters to do with journals, networking, CPD and all that side of member benefit is what they receive from their professional body. And they have to join one of the 36 professional bodies that spans each sector of engineering, like civil or chemical. They have to join one of those before they can come onto our register. A bit about fees. The registration fee in engineering is very low. It ranges in something like £17 to £34, depending on whether you're a technician or an engineer. I should say, though, that the fees for the membership bodies, which I've said might be akin to your discipline associations, are rather higher. So there are a couple of fees, at least, that registrants pay, but they are clearly prepared to pay those. I think there are some similarities in what I've said between our two professions. Each of us has got a very wide range of stakeholders. Each requires certain qualifications. Both are collegiate, addressing a range of subjects and disciplines. Both of us have a very strong need to keep up to date. And each profession can play a learned society role, have the ear of government, be a source of expertise, be that single authoritative voice, and contribute to public policy. So my three and finally comments are, you don't need 100% buy-in to get going. As I've indicated, engineering is well short of that. Past experience of relationships in the noisy room doesn't dictate the future going forward. I should say that the Engineering Council and the professional body relationship in the 1990s was not that great. In fact, it was pretty awful. But we've worked really hard to address the dissatisfaction. And by having very clear remits and working collaboratively, we've got to the space we are now. And the relationship is very good and works very well. And my third point is there's a general principle, separation of regulation and representation is deemed good practice across professions, and so I would stress that that is something to look to. So I hope I've given you some food for thought, and I look forward to contributing to the rest of the evening.
Now, before we open for general conversation, I wonder if I should make some very brief responses to some of the points that have raised through those presentations. And this won't be a very logical or orderly response, but I'll just pick up one or two things here and there. One thing I want to preface those remarks with is quite a fundamental point about what it means to professionalize an occupation. And in teaching, over the last period of time, there has been a lot of emphasis on the school, the institution, as the unit which either succeeds or fails, and a lot of emphasis in position power, in management, as the mechanism for improving that organization. All of which is all very good and nice. But there hasn't been the same emphasis on the individual development of the individual professional practitioner over the whole of their career. Nobody has a responsibility for that. And the process of professionalization is about individuals taking that responsibility, but also providing an infrastructure which enables and supports that to happen. That also means that people are both in authority if they have a management, a leadership position, but they are also an authority as a recognized, advanced, individual professional practitioner. And it's that dimension which is underdeveloped by some of our recent situations. So that's partly about the why would teachers want to buy into this? How to get qualified? Is it a box ticking exercise? Our current thinking is that each level of recognized career progression might be a 4-level or 5-level or 3-level system, whatever it is. The standards for progressing from one level to the next will include knowledge, competencies, impacts, proof of reflection, proof of applying and undertaking research, proof of working developmentally with other professionals in a way that builds up a portfolio of evidence. And then fundamental to being a profession is that it is other professionals, senior professionals, who make the judgment by acting as assessors for grade progression. And this is quite fundamental. But what it means is assessing the recognition of colleagues as they move up their career path becomes an integral part of the work of being a professional practitioner. Obviously governed, regulated, quality assured by the college, but it's embedded in practice. So you don't need a very big central organization to do it because it's become part of the actual practice of how the profession organizes itself day to day. The second thing is about how this evidence should be accumulated. We are committed to developing an online portfolio-based system, making maximum use of modern technology so that, again, it's lean, it's light, it's efficient and easily quality assured. So that's the sort of thing that we're thinking about at the moment.
Can I come in next? I think
Yes.
that would be a really good point to come in. So I think some of the things you said there are fundamentally flawed.
Mm-hmm.
So one thing you didn't talk about in any of what you just said, in terms of assessing the competence of teachers, is student outcomes. It's as though there is a bank of practices that teachers do that if you show you're competent at it, then you are a certain type of teacher.
Yeah, I think I did use the word impact.
Well, no,
it's certainly in our more detailed
well, I don't know if you've read, I'm sure you have, read the Sutton Trust's What Makes Great Teaching. But that unpicks lots of stuff. And the definition of great teaching is that which produces great student progress, full stop. There are other things that you might find in it that you kind of, with the research says it, and has you'd like to see in a certain teacher's portfolio. It says that in terms of judging the quality of teaching, portfolios are fundamentally of no effect or use in terms of judging, because everybody who puts their portfolio together puts the best bits of that practice together. And it really doesn't. If you just let me finish, I think that's really important. I don't think you can judge the quality of teaching by observing lessons. I don't think you can make those judgments. I think it's much more complex. So some of the stuff you're saying worries me, because I think there isn't an easy way to assess the quality of teaching. And that's someone who has 114 teachers, who's just gone through a really, really rigorous professional development assessment of every single one of them. I'm pretty certain, because of the rigour and the triangulation of our processes, that 99% of our teachers are good or outstanding in our school, and I've got really good evidence to prove it, and most of it is about great student outcomes. And I've got a full range of teachers, ones that stand there and virtually dictate to students, and some that are completely student-centric in terms of their approach to teaching and students learning. So there isn't some lovely idea of what great teaching looks like, because it's completely varied. And I think we mustn't even start talking in those terms, because that will be dangerous.
You see, I personally don't disagree with a single word you've said, but what we would be saying is the very best the profession currently knows about these things must be reflected in the way the standards are defined and in the forms of assessment. You know, so wherever practice is, that leading edge needs to be captured and built upon. So that's, you know, I was just trying to emphasize the practical emphasis. This isn't about book learning or academic examinations or those sorts of things. It has a very much a practitioner focus. I'll just see one or two other things I noted I just wanted to throw in at this stage. One was subscriptions. I just want to say, everyone involved knows this is very difficult about, well, are teachers going to join something voluntarily that they have to pay to join? We think they will, actually. We think a critical mass will. There are already, although it may be a minority numeric in the profession as a whole, there are already a lot of teachers that voluntarily pay to be part of a subject association or a phase association, and many of which actually are offering within their field, a professionalized model that the people involved with that, they think it's worth paying out of their own pocket to be part of. So we think that that culture will grow as people see the benefit, as it catches on, as people see that it really is something they want to be, for the status it gives them, the recognition, for the services, for the ways it adds to what they do. I'll make this my last point, although there are so many interesting things I could respond to. About being an evidence-based profession, about having clarity of messages and all of that. I'm giving an individual view here, not a policy on behalf of any particular organisation, that yes, the college should be the forum within which professional practice and research relevant professional practice is debated. It shouldn't, in my view, result in a desire to impose uniformity, a one right way. And, you know, so there's always going to be room for professional judgment, for a range of different viewpoints, a range of different strategies, for, you know, different ideas emerging and so on. So I wouldn't personally want to see that the college as a means to stamp uniformity in situations where that would be very stifling and you know, prevent debate rather than actually encouraging a rich professional debate. Anyway, let's invite Alex.
Yeah, that's right.
Please join the debate.
Again, I've come along to this panel, kind of expecting to see a few more teachers here. I was quite surprised when I entered the room to be one of 6 or 7 people. I'd replied and said, yeah, we'd love to come and see what's going to be said. I realise there are lots of teachers watching this online as well, but I think it's important that we represent ourselves early on in this stage and make known what we want from a college of teaching, because otherwise we'll be done onto in a way that we quite often don't like. One comment I wanted to make again about fees, which I think Raphael's just said. I'm a member of unions, professional bodies, thank you, like the ASE and IOP. So joining the Royal College of Teaching or the College of Teaching, again, will be another cost that will impact my pockets out of my salary rather than potentially something that's provided as part of just being a teacher. Something that's I know I'd be happy to do, so long as we've said, it would be worth it. One example of what might make it worth it for me is access to research. The General Teaching Council of Scotland have just provide free access to research, and that's something we're woefully missing in England. We haven't got access to any of this stuff that we're told about, and that some of us are able to access, you know, using contacts that we have at universities. But it feels to me as though we need more access like that in order for us to be able to progress in the way that I think we should be doing. One other concern that I've had in conversations with other teachers and on Twitter specifically is the remit. You know, some feel that control of education, however much there is, however much the College of Teaching wants to play a part in how education and teachers are allowed to progress in their development and so on, that the control of education should be accountable to the electorate by general election. And so there's a real argument to be had about where the remit stands. My personal opinion is I would like to see more autonomy for teachers and schools rather than controlled by politicians, but not everyone feels that way. So I think it's important that we consider that as well. And the final comment that I wanted to make is just, it's quite ironic. I've come here from school, took my tie off, but everyone else in the room is wearing a tie. Is about feeling that we are professionals, though. It's about making us feel that we're not just doing a job. This is a vocation that we do as well. We need to feel like our profession is valued, and I think a College of Teaching is one way allow that to happen, and hopefully allow us to develop our career paths in a more structured and supportive way. So those are the points I wanted to make. Thank you.
Can I just come back to something there about research? I think Raphael said earlier that teachers as researchers. I think there might be a small case for that, but that's not teachers' jobs.
No.
If you're going to do research properly, there's an awful lot of people in schools who do actual research projects, and they think they're doing research. Well, they ain't, because it's methodologically flawed, and there's no control group, and they type it up and they get it printed on lovely vellum paper, they present it, they talk about it, and it makes no impact on student outcomes whatsoever. There's hundreds, thousands of brilliant research projects and studies that are done by proper researchers who've got control groups, they understand what the methodology is, they know how to measure the impact. That's what we should be accessing, and we should be able to access it in a way that's teacher friendly, doesn't take forever, but does inform our practice and what we think. So we're not guessing in the classroom. And if the Royal College of Teachers could be, as I said at the beginning, some kind of centre for that kind of research access, that would be great.
Thank you. Now, I wonder whether some of those listening online who've not yet had an opportunity to speak would like to join the debate. Hello, is anyone there?
Gareth Alcott's on, I think.
Right. Hello?
They might just need to set that. Okay. Let's wait a minute, shall we?
Can I come in and make a comment while we're waiting?
Yeah.
I think one of the problems I think that we've got with, if it's a voluntary, not that I want people to necessarily join the Royal College of Teaching, but if we're going to be, it's about those that don't engage. And I think that for me, those that don't engage in, whether it's evidence-based research, or whether it's a proper engagement in professional development and their own engagement in their own practice, those are the ones that are most hard to reach, but actually those are the ones that we are needing to reach. So, the circumstances that I've had in my career is that it's great to I work with a lot of very good teachers, and I agree wholeheartedly with what John is saying about the judgment of teaching is about the outcomes of the students, because that's, we can talk about the validity of assessments and examinations, but actually I think John and I know, I'm sure Alex as well and Raphael as well, knows that that is what matters. It is a demonstration of learning, and that's a demonstration of learning that we're stuck with. But it is about that if this is a voluntary thing, which I think it should be, how do we get those that are not engaged in their own professional practice engaged? I think that's the job for the college to approach. Absolutely. Those 20% that don't really engage very much. Maybe it's more, maybe it's less. I don't know. For those that don't engage, how can we improve the system? And the Royal College of Teachers should be about improving the system.
It's because it's about improving the system that actually you have to start small and grow.
Yeah.
For two reasons. One, you want to start off with the most dedicated, the keenest, the people who are going to be fantastic role models. The other thing is a practical consideration. If this is true professionalism, where the assessors are themselves practitioners who've gone through that system, then the fastest rate you can grow is governed by the rate at which you develop a cadre of assessors who've themselves come up through the system. So that sort of governs the pace at which you can roll this out in a way that will actually raise standards rather than not raise them. And in advice I've given to other governments that have been looking at these things, I've argued strongly against anything like mass registration, because it doesn't raise standards. So, and it's when people making employment decisions, they start to say, for this sort of work, I would expect somebody to have this sort of grade of recognition in their professional body. Just as would happen in other professions, and it gradually becomes an expectation. People will see that this is the route by which they do it. And it's obviously not a quick fix. We're talking probably 10 or 15 years to really get very far with this. So, right. I'm being advised. Julie has a question for Deborah about the relationship with
early training.
The early yes, the pre-service training. Yes. How do we do that?
Can you still hear us, Deborah?
Yes. Hello.
So,
I can hear you.
Yeah. Do you want to answer the question?
Well, I can explain what happened. I don't know if it's actually a question, but I think it was an observation on something that I said earlier. Let me just expand a bit on what I was talking about, which is essentially the Engineering Council's influence on engineering degree programmes. In the UK, at undergraduate level, as I'm sure you're all aware, the key agency for quality is the Quality Assurance Agency. But some years ago now, the Quality Assurance Agency withdrew from looking at individual disciplines. And there are some sectors like engineering, and there are many others like pharmacy, for example, and medicine and dentistry, where the profession itself has a very strong role in setting the standard for what should be going on at undergraduate level, i.e. fitting those graduates to practice later on. In our case, going back to my magic number of 36 institutions, anything that we do is very generic, but we publish a document which is called Accreditation of Higher Education Degree Programmes in Engineering, and our standards in that document are all learning outcomes, very much outcomes focused, and any engineering degree in the UK, regardless of whether it's called mechanical or nuclear or chemical or whatever, if it wants to secure Engineering Council accredited status and get what is in effect a kite mark, has to meet those standards that we set. Now, one of the things I meant to say in relation to competence, but which also applies to degrees, is that the standards are not set in stone. So we review those every 5 years. And in fact, we reviewed all our standards last year. And we can clearly tweak what the requirements are according to what has suddenly become very important. For example, in our area, risk and health and safety. So this is really, really key. And from where we sit, we talk to industry a lot, obviously, and industry has a very strong voice, and it says that we want graduates in engineering who are able to join our company and are useful to us and can do work to the right standard. And they're only going to be able to do that if they've got the right knowledge from their degree programme. So that's a really important role that we carry out.
Thank you. Thank you. Can we turn to Gareth Alcott next, please?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
I can barely hear you. My question was referring back to an earlier point about research and how the college could have an impact with research in the classrooms that I think John mentioned.
Yes.
The Education Endowment Foundation has done a fantastic job of bringing research into schools, and I was just wondering how the college could sort of emulate that in the future, and maybe John or one of the other panelists has got a view on that.
A good point. Who wants to come in?
Hi, Gareth. Yeah, I agree. We're running an RCT, not a randomised controlled trial, not a Royal College of Teaching, with them at the moment. And what we're doing is, in our RCT with the EEF, is we're trying to get underneath whether research makes any impact on student outcomes whatsoever. It's a piece of research on the efficacy of research. And I think you're right, they've done a great job in beginning that process. And then, when you talk to Kevin Collins, I was with him last week or the week before, talking about the impact of research, it's going to take kind of a decade or more, 2 decades, before we're anywhere near being a profession which is evidence-based. You talk to Ben Goldacre, he talks about 2 or 3 generations of teachers before becoming an evidence-based profession. I still believe quite clearly, in my experience with 114 teachers, that there's probably 1 or 2 geeky people like me who are really into it, and there's a few who are pretty good at it and interesting, and there's lots and lots of people where teaching, they're passionate about it, they do a good job, but they've got a family, they go home, they've got 2 kids to bring up, they've got marriage to make successful or partnership to make successful, all sorts of things. They've got lives above being this profession, this kind of obsessive professional. And I think that's a really important thing if we talk about workload for us to remember.
Could I just...
I agree, John. I think that perhaps the emphasis should be on schools and head teachers to sort of promote a culture where research has to be part of the professional development, and I think the college could help with that. I think it's the University of York does a weekly or bi-weekly review, the Institute of Effective Research for Education, and that's a great summary of sort of recent research that can be emailed to you once a week.
Agree more, and we work with them, and Jonathan Sharples, Dr. Jonathan Sharples, is a mate of mine who also does work, and he's now with the EEF on sabbatical. So you're right, there's lots of great stuff, it's whether it gets through to teachers.
Okay, and Alex?
Yeah, I was just going to say there are other organisations as well. There's Research Ed who holds, they're in their 2nd year now, holding kind of grassroots conferences about research and education. So there are lots and lots of routes for teachers to be involved in research. I mean, they're going global this year, so taking their wares off to New York and Australia. So, there's a real thirst for using research by, I think, as John's right, by a geeky selection of teachers. Probably I would include myself in that. Who have to juggle family lives and so on. But we take the time to come to things like this and go to things like Research Ed because we're interested in that side of the job as well. And so I think we shouldn't have the expectation that every single teacher who's a teacher has to do research or be really embedded in research as well. I think they just need to know where to get it if they need it and how to get it and how to use it. So I think they need to be versed in research, be able to read research and understand what it means, unpick it, be able to sort the wheat from the chaff, be able to recognise when learning styles might not be the most effective research that's ever been invented, and so on. But unless we have access to what the best has been written and so on, to paraphrase our former leader, we cannot use that. So I think what we need is organisations to link themselves with each other. So the College of Teaching might not necessarily take over or emulate what the EEFs do, but they might. I think they already do from what I've here. So I think that's the way forward. It's about linking all of these organisations and bodies together so that we can help teachers do their job as best they can.
Thank you.
No, I agree, and I think if we're truly going to try and raise the professionalisation of teachers within society.
Hello, we've lost you.
Sorry.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes,
hello.
For a moment, yes.
Yeah, I was just saying, really, if the expectation is that the professionalisation of teaching within society is going to be raised, I think that there has to be an onus on teachers to recognise the power of research and make it tacit as part of the culture, not only as a classroom teacher, but within schools, and get it recognised with all stakeholders that's what we are as a profession. We engage with research in order to have better outcomes for students, and ultimately that's what it's about.
Yes, I think, I personally resonate very much with what you've just said. I think we have to recognise that it is a contested field as to what research are good research, and the precise ways research inform practice. Those are actually areas in which people have very strong and different views, and I would actually see the College of Teaching as a forum to enable those debates to move forward, not to align itself solely with one camp or the other, but to enable that debate. Can I ask you to facilitate?
Yeah, sure. Okay. Yeah, Deborah, could you answer the question that's been put to you by Julie? Could you tell us how that works in engineering? What level of
the engineering council has absolutely nothing to do with research and current practice. We set the standards of competence and commitment, and we look at engineering degrees, but that's pretty much where it stops. The individual subject-specific professional will be doing people knowledge. Or responsible for consultation. And the body of fellows who I mentioned earlier, the Royal Academy of Engineering, does a lot of research on technical matters and organizational matters. But I also big differences between your profession and engineering is that, of course, a lot of research goes on in our companies. These are household names to you: Rolls-Royce, BAE Systems, BT, British Gas. They're all companies with a very strong engineering base, and they will have their own R&D divisions who are carrying out cutting-edge research. So if you're a new graduate and you want to find out the big new technique about, I don't know, carbon capture or carbon storage, then you will go to one of those companies and look at their publications, as long as they're not confidential, and do it that way. So it's rather different. But perhaps I could just make one comment. I'm very struck that you're all hung up on this word research, and isn't this just one element of continuing professional development? In the engineering profession, we as the Engineering Council do set a requirement of all registrants that they maintain and enhance their competence. Now, how they choose to do that is up to the individual, which reflects the comment made earlier that the individual takes responsibility for what their needs are. Now, that might be research, but it might also be sharing good practice with colleagues, or it might be going out and observing something in another organisation. So I think that there are probably other ways to remember that there are, to keep up with what's good practice.
Thank you.
I was just going to make another quick comment about research things. I don't think this the College of Teaching should necessarily just be concentrating on research, but I think we've got to echoes what you were saying before about the fact that there's a variety of I'll say a variety of quality of research, but it's far harder, I think, in teaching to know when research applies to your situation. I think in engineering or in science, research is far more cut and dry. We have far more useful outcomes, I think, potentially from scientific research that we need to be a bit more circumspect about using research in our settings. And the research should be there to advise schools and settings in what they might look at doing. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's definitely going to work in their setting. And I'm a big advocate for looking at research and so on, but I think we also need to be advising teachers who join the Royal College of Teaching how to use research effectively. And so it's not just a case of saying if you don't just use that research, you have to use this research in order to improve your outcomes. It will depend on your setting and so on.
Can I just make 2 more points on that? I have the phrase, Alex, that any intervention is only as good as the practitioner. The practitioner is the intervention. And I think when you do any kind of research, the process evaluation is really important to see exactly what happened, because everybody's implemented accelerated reader for the level 3 readers in year 7, but every school has done it differently. And that's the thing with teaching. And I also, I'm interested, Deborah, in you establishing the standards, setting the standards of competence. I'm going to be a bit cheeky here, but for engineers that's a bit easier because you're largely dealing with materials that are consistent. If you're using wood, steel, fibre optic, whatever it is, you know what they are. And our kind of raw materials are cheeky human beings who knows what they've done in the morning or whatever. The context is quite different, and that makes our job in terms of setting standards and competencies as a Royal College much more difficult than it does in yours. I know you'll probably pick my argument there apart, but our raw materials are very different.
Well, yeah, I will pick your argument apart. I mean, everything that an engineer does is really aimed at a product who's going to be used by someone. Just to say a little bit about our standards of competence, they fall into 5 broad areas. One of those areas is communication. One of those areas is to do with management and leadership. One of those areas is to do with professionalism, standards and ethics. Only 2 of them are what you might call hard engineering practice and underpinning science and mathematics, etc., etc. So please don't go away thinking that engineers are all these, hard hat wearing, materials wielding geeks. They deal with people. They deal in teams. They have to present their ideas to society. And so those 3 areas of competence that are not hard engineering are really, really important. And these are all threshold standards. They have to meet the standards in all 5 areas if they're going to come onto the register. So they can't be a fantastic engineering geek and not be able to communicate. That won't do.
Look people in the eye and stuff like that. Good. That's really interesting. That taught me a lot. Thank you.
I think it because I think one thing we're finding through this process is that when we look at other professions, some of which seem so very different from teaching, and how they operate as a profession, we're finding more and more things that we can actually learn from, or that do bear some comparison. So that is interesting. Who wants to say something next?
Yeah, can we move away from the research elements? I mean, I think that we perhaps could do with that. I mean, one of the things, and go to kind of a broader focus, ridiculous thing to say, But a broader element to this is about this clarity of message. How are we going to, how are we not going to duplicate? Because whatever we've talked about here, you know, we've brought up examples of the research element, but you know, there's also the leadership side. How are we not going to duplicate stuff? It seems to be clearer in engineering that there are fewer voices to be heard, and I just wonder how the you know, the Royal College is going to see its way through. You came back to me earlier on about this, and perhaps that's an area that we could move the discussion on a little bit.
Yes, I mean, as I see it, although there's a lot going on in the field, a busy, noisy room, many organisations and so on tripping over each other in how they're operating. But there are actually some gaps, and the key initial small role of this new College of Teaching would actually be doing things that are simply not happening at the moment, that they're filling a space that nobody is occupying effectively. Properly supported teaching practitioners and some stakeholders. That's filling a gap. Now, as this body develops a reputation for being a useful and trustworthy and reputable organisation, it will be natural for some of the other functions to begin to recruit too. So there are two models. You can either legislate, which we've absolutely ruled out as being great, or it's the self-assertion model. The profession simply says, we are going to work with you, and we don't need any legislation. That said, after, say, 5 or 10 years of working differently, it would be then very natural for a future government to say, well, actually, some regulatory functions should now be passed to this body. Much in the same way, after the 97 election, that government transferred fiscal policy to the Bank of England. So, well, actually, politicians shouldn't be doing this. We now think those sorts of things should go to the Bank of England. There are certain aspects of regulation to do with teaching that a future might entrust by transferring to a college of teaching, if by that stage it has won everybody's trust and confidence.
One example that I can think of is the teaching standards. We are given the teaching standards, their statutory document, and yet we're discussing around the room about how we expect teachers to work. And effectively, if we come up with a College of Teaching set of teaching standards, are they going to fight against the ones that the government of the day have decided, or they augment them? Will they essentially at the beginning be the same, or what? And I think that's a point that potentially, if we do the job right, and if teachers embraces and I think augment the standards in a way that they exist at the moment, they are what they are, and we adapt those and augment them, then maybe that will happen, and maybe the government of the day, 10 years or 5 years down the line, might say, okay, yeah, you seem to be handling this as a professional body, you seem to be aligned with our way of thinking of what your standards should be, carry on. The danger of that is then when it gets taken away again, and potentially we get told that actually no, what you're doing is not what we want our teachers to do. We want you to behave in a different manner.
But it is a good example. And what we're saying at the moment is we don't want to have any kind of legislation to move forward. Therefore, for the time being, we will accept and honour the status of these statutory standards. However, they will be augmented. They are weak in certain areas to do with, I hate to use the word again, but use it research, but also in strengthening self-reflection and certain other things. So those standards are good as the baseline, but to get the higher statuses, say a charter teacher status or something like that, they would be all necessary. And as you say, over time, it could go the way you said. Obviously, operating under a royal charter protects the basic existence and function of the organisation in perpetuity, but governments can legislate in areas that are of interest and have an overlap and things. So there is always that tension between professions and government, but at the moment we've got an imbalance.
I think what's fascinating about that is when we met with Michael Gove back in February, and we were talking about the teacher standards, and I was saying about how dreadful, one of us was saying how dreadful they are. He said, well, teachers wrote them, don't you know what your job is? Yeah, it's a clever shot, isn't it? But if you read, everybody should read Rob Coe's What Makes Great Teaching, because that's the answer. Because it's almost impossible to identify what great teaching is, other than through the student outcomes of 5 or 6 general practices that you want to see. Right? Because, as I said, talking earlier about the raw materials. So I think we have to be really careful talking about a set of standards, because I challenge you, I challenge anybody in this room to come up with a set of standards that is at all workable.
Yes, but incidentally, I'm going to suggest we wind up in a few minutes. I think that we're coming to a natural end with this. But I think that we have been very insular in the English system, and there are actually standards in other jurisdictions that I would say are more in line.
Well, standards in monitoring in the States. I was in Washington DC last week, a week before last. So the data educators, the best educators across the world, and Rob Coe gave his talk about how none of them can tell what good teaching is. And if you observe teaching, you've got just about a better chance than a coin toss to see if it's good or not. You really can't tell. So I think, even if international jurisdictions, Danielson's criteria, whatever you use, it's still darn hard to nail down a set of criteria. See, I've read the ones.
Yes, and we'll all have our favourites, probably. But I would say that Britain is not in the lead in the science and art of developing those standards, and they are immensely useful to individuals. A practitioner wants some kind of checklist and some set of things to reflect against, and it's at that sort of level that these documents can be helpful. So, Aidan is...
So we've got a quick question for you, Deborah, from Julie. She says, what advice would you give on a prospective or potential College of Teaching becoming a respected voice for education?
Gosh, that's a big one. That's a few sound bites. I mean, one is there's no point ever going to politicians or one of the government departments and whinging and complaining. If you're not happy with something, you need to go along in a spirit of solutions-oriented approach. Come along with some better ideas. Speak with a united voice. I mean, I said that the engineering profession is now well respected in government because we decided that we were going to have a united voice and we were going to work together. And this took quite a lot of guts from some of the professional bodies to say, okay, if there's a government response about engineering in general, we'll let the Royal Academy of Engineering respond on all of our behalf. They will consult with us, but they will send in the response. And so on and so on. We the Engineering Council, respond on standards. So the government is very clear who they are talking to, and we're not going along and complaining about things. We're going along with solutions. But this does take time, and you need to nurture some alliances. One of the things that's important to look at are the select committees, both in the Commons and the Lords. And look at the relevant one, ours is science and technology. Develop some relationships with people on those select committees so that they know when they want some evidence, they will come to you for the evidence.
Thank you. And we've got one last question come in from Gareth, which Alex is going to answer quickly.
Well, I've also had a question, sorry, miscommunication or misunderstanding there from a colleague on Twitter as well that I wanted to ask myself, so I'll ask that as well. But Gareth's question was, what's the single most important selling point of the Royal College of Teachers when we present it to teachers? And I think that's an important question to ask. We want to be finding out what the Royal College of Teaching is going to do for us. So what does the panel think? The biggest selling point. I'm the teacher.
I teach.
I was going to
teach loads. I'll teach us. There's 3.
I mean, I think that it has to be, if you join the Royal College of Teaching, this will make a difference to the kids that you see.
Full stop. Period.
Yeah.
Are we finished?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm sensing we've come to a natural break in the flow of discussion now, and I know that some participants need to get away. It's been a tremendously useful debate. It's all recorded. It will all form part of the consultations that are ongoing, and there will be further opportunities. There will be further seminars in the new year. There will be further proposals put out for consultation about turning these ideas into something concrete. And I feel that we've had a most valuable discussion, and thanks to everyone for being part of it and for the contributions that we've had. Thank you.